The first thing you need to understand about humans is that nobody told them the rules, and the second thing you need to understand is that even if someone had told them the rules, they would have smiled politely, nodded slowly, and then done exactly whatever they were going to do anyway. My name is Vorra Kuul, Senior Safety Compliance Officer aboard the Galactic Union Wellness Station, orbiting Ring 7. I have held this position for 14 years. I have filed complaints against Drax engineers for overloading reactor coolant corridors. I have issued warnings to Felian merchants for storing volatile spice canisters near ignition vents. I once suspended an entire Goroth maintenance crew for using anti-gravity boots in a clearly marked no-float zone. I thought I had seen everything. Then Station Command told me we were getting a human. His name was Dale. Just Dale. No family title prefix. No clan designation. No rank suffix. I asked the intake officer if the human had accidentally truncated his identification file. The intake officer just shrugged and said, "No, sir. He says his full name is Dale. He also says he prefers his coffee, and I am quoting directly here, sir, black and scalding." I stared at the intake form for a very long time. Dale arrived on a mid-cycle transport from the human homeworld. He was medium height by human standards, which still made him taller than most of our Felhari staff. He had brown hair, a jaw that looked like it was built specifically for enduring hardship, and eyes that carried the very specific expression of someone who was perpetually mildly entertained by the universe. He was wearing a shirt that said something in his native language. When I had it translated, it read, "Rest is for the dead." I filed my first concern report before he even left the docking bay. The station operates under standard Galactic Union gravity protocols. Every species that boards this facility gets a personal gravity assignment calibrated to their home world's pull. Humans come from a mid-range gravity world, approximately 1 unit on the universal scale. We assign them corridors and quarters set to 1.0. Very reasonable, very safe, very boring, if you ask a human, apparently. Dale was given his quarters on level 12, corridor G, along with a full orientation packet, a map of the station, a list of safety regulations, and a very clear document I personally wrote titled, "What Not to Do on a Galactic Union Station, a Guide for Beings Who Value Surviving." It was 47 pages long. I was proud of it. Dale folded it into a small paper bird. I know this because my junior officer Tella Rix, a small Benny female with 4 arms and an excellent memory for minor violations, witnessed him do it. She said he did it with the calm focus of someone performing a sacred ritual. He placed the paper bird on the intake desk, winked at her, and walked off down the corridor whistling something tonally incomprehensible. Tella came to my office and sat very still for a moment before saying, "Sir, I think we have a problem." The first 24 hours were deceptively quiet. Dale checked in with the medical team. He passed all his physical assessments. He even attended the mandatory station orientation session. Though our senior orientation guide, a Felian named Brute with 40 years of experience, later told me that Dale had spent the entire session asking questions that were technically within the bounds of the curriculum, but somehow made Brute feel like the entire premise of station safety was being philosophically dismantled in real time. He asked me, Brute said, pressing 3 of his fingers to his temple ridge, why the maximum recommended exertion level in variable gravity zone 4 was set at 70% of species standard capacity. And when I explained it was for safety, he said, and I am quoting, "But what if someone just wanted to see what happened at 110%? And then he smiled. Vorra. He smiled when he said it. I told Brute to go lie down. Variable Gravity Zone 4 is one of 6 experimental gravity research corridors aboard the station. Scientists use them for low-gravity fluid dynamics studies, high-gravity material stress testing, and various other things I do not fully understand but deeply respect for the number of warning signs they require. The zones can be adjusted between 0 and 6 times standard planetary gravity. They are restricted. Access requires a clearance code, a signed liability waiver, a buddy system confirmation, and the personal approval of a zone supervisor. On the morning of day 2, at approximately 6 station standard hours, a maintenance technician named Guro was doing his routine check of Zone 4 and found something that made him stand completely still in the doorway for 30 seconds before activating his communicator. The something was Dale. Dale was jogging, not standing in the zone, not cautiously walking along the edge of it, not doing a careful supervised low-intensity movement study, jogging, full, committed, arms pumping, feet slapping the deck, rhythmic jogging. And the gravity read out on the wall panel was not sitting at the standard human assignment of 1.0. It was sitting at 5.3. Guro later told me that his first instinct was that the readout was broken, because the readout being broken was a more comforting explanation than the alternative, which was that a human being was voluntarily jogging through a gravity field that would have rendered most of our station crew unable to lift their own heads off the floor. Dale noticed Guro standing in the doorway. He waved. People, full arm, cheerful, casual wave, like he was greeting someone across a marketplace and not currently experiencing the equivalent of having 5 times his own body weight pressing down on every single cell in his body. Guro waved back. He told me later he did not know why he waved back. He thinks it was the social reflex taking over, because his brain had already shut down all higher reasoning functions. Dale finished his lap. Then he slowed to a walk, hit a button on the wall panel, and the gravity in the zone descended back to standard. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck. Something Guro said produced a sound like a series of small weapons discharging, and then walked toward the exit looking absolutely refreshed. "Great zone," Dale said to Guro. "Bit short though. You think they'd let me run a longer route?" Guro filed an incident report. Guro then filed a personal wellness request. Guro then, I was told, went to the station canteen and sat quietly with a warm beverage for 40 minutes. The incident report landed on my desk at 0700 hours. I read it 3 times. Then I read it a 4th time because I was convinced I had misread something. I had not misread anything. The report clearly stated that a human crew member, one Dale, no further designation, had accessed variable gravity zone 4 using a clearance code that was technically valid, because as we later discovered, he had spent the previous evening befriending Supervisor Drexel at the canteen, listening to him talk about his research for 2 hours, and at some point during the conversation, Drexel had enthusiastically offered to give Dale a tour and access code because, and this is a direct quote from Drexel's own follow-up statement, he seemed so genuinely interested, I did not think he would use it at 6 in the morning to go running. I called Dale to my office. He arrived on time. He was wearing different clothing than the previous day but the same expression, that faintly amused, comfortable look that I was beginning to suspect was simply his face's default setting. He sat down in the chair across from my desk, relaxed, hands resting easy on the armrests, and looked at me like a being who had done absolutely nothing wrong and was simply curious what the weather was like on my home world. "Dale," I said. "Vorra," he said. He said, "My name." He said it back to me, like we were colleagues, like we were old friends catching up after a long trip. I had not told him my name. He had apparently learned it, at some point, somehow. "Do you understand what variable gravity zone 4 is used for?" I asked. "Materials stress research and fluid dynamics," he said, "and apparently jogging. Now, it is not used for jogging." "Seemed like a waste," he said. "All that gravity just sitting there doing nothing." I pulled up the incident report on my screen. The zone was set to 5.3. That is 5 times your species' standard gravity. Do you understand what that means for your body? He leaned forward slightly, and for just a moment I thought, here it is. Here is the moment where the human realizes the scope of what he did and experiences something approaching appropriate concern. "Yeah," Dale said, "it means your legs have to work harder, better cardio return. I've done 6 before, but the corridor was a bit short so I didn't want to push it." He had done 6 before. He had done 6 before, and his complaint about the corridor was its length. I sat back in my chair. I looked at the ceiling. I thought about the 14 years I had spent in safety compliance. I thought about every form I had ever filed, every warning I had ever issued, every safety briefing I had ever sat through. I thought about my retirement, which was 7 years away, and whether I could reasonably move it up. "Dale," I said very carefully, "I need to explain something to you." "Sure," he said. "When most species experience 5 times their standard gravity, they are incapacitated. Their circulatory systems cannot pump blood against that pressure. Their muscles cannot support their own skeletal weight. A Phalian in that zone would collapse within seconds. A Drax would lose consciousness in under a minute. A Beni would experience structural fractures along their primary limb joints. These are not exaggerations. These are documented physiological facts." Dale nodded slowly. He appeared to be genuinely listening. "That zone," I continued, "exists for mechanical testing and controlled scientific research because it is understood by all species aboard this station that no living crew member should be voluntarily operating inside it at those levels." Dale was quiet for a moment. I thought I was getting through to him. Then he said, "So humans are different, right? Like Earth gravity is already on the heavier side for a medium world. Our hearts are built like pumps. Our leg muscles are, well, we were pursuit predators. You know what pursuit predators are?" I did not respond. "We ran things to death," Dale said. "We didn't have claws or venom or big teeth. We just followed things, for hours, until they were too tired to keep going. That's basically the whole evolutionary pitch." He said this the way someone might explain a recipe, casually, without any apparent awareness that he had just described the history of his species as, essentially, relentless biological harassment. I picked up my stylus. I opened a new complaint form. "I am going to need you," I said, "to not use variable gravity zone 4 without a supervised session and a full medical clearance." "That's fair," Dale said. I paused. "Really?" I said. "Sure," he said. "I don't want to cause problems. I just needed a morning run. You got a regular gym on this station?" I confirmed that yes, we had a gym, a perfectly acceptable, standard gravity, safety-compliant gym on level 8. Dale nodded, stood, stretched in a way that suggested his spine contained approximately twice the number of joints a spine should reasonably have, and headed for the door. "Hey," he said, pausing at the threshold. I looked up. "Is that gym open at 6? "It opens at 7, I said. He made a small, disappointed sound. "Guess I'll just do bodyweight circuits in the corridor until then." He left. I stared at the door for a full minute after he had gone. Then I opened a new form. I titled it, Provisional Human Activity Protocol, Draft 1. It was going to be a very long document. The Provisional Human Activity Protocol, Draft 1, took me 3 days to write. It was 62 pages long. It covered everything from approved exertion zones to maximum recommended weight loads, corridor speed limits during off-peak hours, and a very specific clause I titled, Gravity Zone Access Restrictions for Beings Who Think 6 times Standard is a Reasonable Workout. I was thorough. I was detailed. I was, if I do say so myself, absolutely professional about the entire thing. Dale read every single page of it. I know this because he came back to my office with the document printed out, annotated in the margins in his own handwriting, with 3 pages of follow-up questions attached at the back. He knocked on my doorframe, leaned in with that expression on his face, that perpetually calm, slightly entertained look that I had come to understand was basically Dale's way of existing, and said, "Hey, got a minute?" I did not have a minute. I had a backlog of 12 other reports, a Goroth maintenance dispute waiting on my desk, and a splitting headache that had started approximately 48 hours after Dale's arrival and had not stopped since. "Sit down," I said. He sat. He placed the annotated document on my desk like a student presenting a very enthusiastic essay. I looked at the first margin note. It said, "Why is the maximum corridor jog speed set lower than a standard human walk?" I looked at the second margin note. It said, "Define excessive exertion, excessive compared to what baseline?" I looked at the third margin note, and it said, simply, "Seems arbitrary." I set the document face down on my desk. "Dale," I said, "the protocol is not a negotiation." "I know," he said. "I just had some thoughts." "I can see that. Page 41 especially." "Dale, you said no unsupervised resistance training above 250 kilograms, he said. "That's a supervision threshold, not a limit. So technically supervised, I could go higher, right?" The headache intensified. Here is the thing about Dale that I was slowly, painfully learning. He was not reckless. That was the deeply confusing part. A reckless being you can work with. A reckless being makes mistakes, learns consequences, adjusts behavior. Dale was not reckless. Dale was precise. He read everything. He asked clarifying questions. He followed the rules, all of them, right up to the exact line where the rules became a framework he could build interesting things on top of. It was like trying to regulate someone who had studied the entire rulebook specifically to understand where the interesting gaps were. "Let me explain something," I said, folding my hands on the desk. "This station has 312 crew members from 17 different species. When any of those crew members observe you performing activities that exceed what their species is physically capable of, it creates a psychological event." Dale tilted his head slightly. "A psychological event?" "Guro," I said. "The maintenance technician who found you in Zone 4. Do you know what he told the station counselor during his wellness consultation?" "I didn't know he went to a counselor," Dale said. He looked genuinely surprised, and also faintly, a little guilty. "Good. Guilt was progress, he said. I continued, reading from my notes. That witnessing you jog through 5.3 gravities while waving casually had fundamentally altered his understanding of what a body was supposed to be able to do, and that he was now questioning several assumptions he had held since childhood about the physical limits of organic life. Dale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's kind of a nice thing to say, actually." I put my face in my hands. The situation escalated on day 6. I want to be very clear that I used the word escalated intentionally, and not metaphorically. Things literally, physically, escalated in the sense that Dale went upward when he should not have. The station has an exterior maintenance ring on the upper hull. It is accessed through a pressurized airlock system, used exclusively by certified EVA technicians for hull inspections and external equipment repairs. It requires a full EVA suit, a tether certification, a buddy confirmation, and 2 separate officer approvals. It is not, under any definition, a recreational space. Our EVA technician team lead, a tall, quiet Drax named Forru, had been running a routine inspection with his team when he noticed something on his external camera feed that made him stop walking mid-corridor and stand very still. There was a human on the hull, not a suited EVA technician conducting authorized work. A human. In a suit, yes, but moving in a way that no EVA technician had any business moving, which is to say quickly, and with what Forru later described as a sort of bouncing quality, like he was enjoying it. Dale had, it turned out, obtained his EVA certification 11 months prior on a human deep space construction project before joining the Galactic Union exchange program. His certification was entirely valid. His suit was properly rated. His tether was attached and functioning. He had technically followed every single step of the EVA access protocol, including getting buddy confirmation from Drexel, who we really needed to have a separate conversation with. What Dale had not done was mention that his intention upon reaching the exterior hull was to, and I am using Forru's exact words from the incident report, run laps on the hull of a space station, in orbit. Because as Dale later explained to me in my office, sitting in that same relaxed posture, with that same mildly entertained face, the low gravity in the outer hull ring, approximately 0.2 standard, combined with the magnetic boot grip of the EVA suit, created what he described as the best long jump conditions I've ever experienced. You push off, and you just go. You ever seen a human broad jump in 0.2 gravity, Vorra? It's something. I had not seen it. I had, however, received 17 separate distress communications from crew members watching it on the external camera feeds from various monitoring stations across the ship. The messages ranged from, "Please confirm this is authorized," to, "Is this a drill?" to one from Brute, the orientation guide, that simply read, "I am retiring." Brute was not retiring. I checked with HR, but the fact that he sent the message said everything. I called a formal crew briefing. First one I had called in 3 years. The last one had been about reactor coolant protocol during a near incident in Corridor B. This one was about a human. The briefing room was full. I had not expected a full room. I had sent a general notification and expected maybe 30 attendants. Every species on board apparently found this relevant to their immediate well-being, because 247 of our 312 crew members showed up. Some of them were off-duty. Some of them had come in wearing civilian clothing. Guro was there, sitting in the second row with a warm beverage, looking like someone who had accepted the universe was a stranger place than he had previously understood, and was working on being okay with that. Dale was also there. I had not specifically invited him, but he had heard about it through whatever invisible social network humans apparently build within 72 hours of arriving anywhere. He sat near the back, arms folded, politely attentive. I stood at the front of the room and took a slow breath. "This briefing," I said, "is to address the events of the past 6 days and to provide context for the behavior of our newest crew member. I want to begin by assuring everyone that Dale is not malfunctioning. He is not under duress. He is not conducting an unauthorized experiment. He is, as far as we can determine, simply doing what humans do." The room was very quiet. "Humans," I continued, "are, according to Union xenobiology files which I spent an embarrassing amount of time reading this week, an anomalous species in several specific ways. Their cardiovascular systems are, and I am quoting the file directly, disproportionately robust for a species of their size and world classification. Their skeletal and muscular structure tolerates compressive force well beyond what the standard Union table predicts for their gravity tier. And their psychological relationship with physical exertion is, I paused. I looked for the right word. Recreational. Someone in the fourth row made a sound. I think it was Teller. It sounded like a suppressed laugh. What this means practically, I said, is that activities which represent extreme or dangerous physical stress for most union species are experienced by humans as hobbies. More quiet. Then Forru, from his seat near the aisle, raised one of his large grey hands. So when he was running on the hull, Forru said, he was not in distress. He was not in distress, I confirmed. He was having fun. Apparently yes. Guro lowered his hand. He looked at the wall for a moment. Then he said, quietly, I filed a traumatic incident report. I know, I said. I thought I was watching someone die. I understand. He waved at the camera. Forru said. He waved at me, while bouncing across the outer hull. Yes, he does that. From the back of the room, Dale's voice came through, warm and genuinely apologetic. I'm really sorry about that, Forru. I didn't think about how it would look from inside. I should have said something first. Every head in the room turned toward the back. Dale raised one hand in a quiet acknowledgement. He looked like he meant it. He looked, honestly, like he felt bad. Not about doing the thing, that much was clear, but about not telling anyone first. Forru stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, You could have told me you were going. You're right, Dale said. I could have. I will next time. Next time, Forru repeated. I'll wave at the camera so you know it's on purpose, Dale added. So it doesn't look like an emergency. Forru's expression shifted through several things very quickly. Then he said, That is somehow both better and worse than what I was expecting you to say. I resumed control of the briefing. I outlined a revised framework, one that I had been working on in the 3 sleepless days between Zone 4 and the Hull incident. It was not 62 pages this time. I had learned something from the annotated document. This one was 12 pages, specific, clear, and built around a simple principle that I had spent an embarrassingly long time arriving at. The principle was this: do not try to stop Dale from doing things. Try to make sure someone knows when Dale is doing things. It was not the safety protocol I had imagined writing when I took this job. It was not the protocol any of my training had prepared me for, but it was the protocol that matched the reality of the situation, and sometimes that is the best you can do. The 12-page framework included a simple notification system. If Dale wanted to use a restricted zone, he messaged a designated contact first. If he wanted EVA access for non-standard activity, he informed Forru. If he wanted to use the gravity research corridors for personal training, he booked a supervised slot with Drexel, who had, after a long and frank conversation, agreed to stop handing out his access codes at the canteen and also to start attending crew safety refreshers. Dale looked over the framework at the briefing. I watched him read it. I watched his eyes move down the pages. I waited for the margin notes, for the follow-up questions, for the quiet, reasonable, devastating observation that the whole thing was technically still a framework he could build interesting things on top of. He closed the document. He looked up. This works, he said. The room was quiet. Yeah, I said. I was not certain I had heard him correctly. Yeah, he said. It's reasonable. You're not telling me not to do things. You're asking me to loop people in. I can do that. He paused. I should have been doing that anyway. I just didn't realize how different this all looked from the outside. Guro, from the second row, let out a breath that sounded like it had been building for 6 days. Teller made that sound again. This time I was sure it was a laugh. I looked at Dale for a long moment. 14 years of safety compliance work, 17 species, 300 incident forms, and here, at the end of a very long week, was the thing I had somehow not expected. The human was reasonable, he just needed a different kind of framework, one built around communication instead of restriction. Dale, I said. Vorra, he said. Next time you want to run on the hull, I'll tell Forru, he said. Next time you want the gravity research corridor, I'll book a slot with Drexel. And next time, I said, you want to jog at 5.3 gravities before 7 in the morning. He almost smiled. I'll invite someone to watch, for the experience. Guro made a strangled noise. For documentation purposes, I said firmly, not entertainment. Sure, Dale said, documentation. He was absolutely going to call it entertainment anyway. The briefing ended. Crew members filtered out in clusters, talking quietly in the way beings talk when they have collectively processed something that shifted their perspective on the universe. Forru stopped near the door and looked back at Dale. Dale gave him a small nod. Forru gave him a small nod back. It was the nod of two beings who had reached a quiet mutual understanding that mostly consisted of, I will tell you before I do things and you will try not to file a trauma report. I stayed behind after the room cleared. Teller came to stand beside me. She was looking at the door Dale had just walked through. You know, she said, he asked me this morning, what species holds the station record for the most distance run on the hull in a single EVA session. What did you tell him? I told him we didn't have a record for that because no one had ever done it before. I already knew what was coming, but I asked anyway. What did he say? Teller smiled with all four of her mouths at once, something she only does when she finds something genuinely wonderful. He said, well, someone's got to set it first. I picked up my stylus. I opened a new form. I labeled it Provisional Human Activity Protocol, Draft 2. Outside, somewhere on the station, I could hear Dale in the corridor, talking to someone, laughing about something, completely at ease in a place that had filed more reports about him in 6 days than about any other crew member in 6 years. The thing is, and I say this as a safety compliance officer who spent a full week of his professional life trying to write rules that kept pace with one single human being, the thing is that the station felt different after Dale arrived, not worse, not more dangerous, not really, just different. Like something that had been humming along at a comfortable, predictable frequency had suddenly found a new note. A strange note, a slightly alarming note, a note that waved at you cheerfully while doing something physically impossible and asked if the corridor was long enough for a second lap. But a note, nonetheless. I submitted Draft 2 to Station Command at 2200 hours. The covering memo read, Revised Safety Framework for Human Crew Integration. Emphasis shifted from restriction to notification. Protocol duration indefinite. Revision frequency likely high. Command approved it within the hour. At the bottom of the approval, someone had added a handwritten line. I did not recognize the handwriting but later learned it belonged to Station Director Muvra, a being who had been running this station for 22 years and who I had genuinely believed had seen everything. The note read, Good work, Kuul. Also, is it true the human jogged on the hull? Because I am watching the camera footage right now, and I have 3 questions. I wrote back. Yes, it was authorized after the fact. And whatever your 3 questions are, the answer is probably yes, he did it on purpose, and no, he was not in any danger. Director Muvra's response came 4 minutes later. It said, incredible. It said it like that. 1 word. No additional context. Just incredible. And honestly, sitting at my desk at 2200 station hours, with Draft 2 approved and filed and the corridor finally quiet, I looked at the external camera feed that Forru had left open on the monitoring screen, the one showing the outer hull ring, still and empty in the dark of space, and I thought about Dale out there bouncing across it that afternoon like gravity was more of a suggestion than a rule. I thought about 14 years of compliance work and every species I had ever written a protocol for, and then I thought, yeah, incredible.